Greetings, everyone. This is Professor Theo. This is a commentary on the forum for discussion number 3. The question we had this week was, why are human beings poor at making attributions? And as a quick reminder, an attribution is an explanation that we attribute to someone in regards to how it explains their behaviors. So whenever we see someone behave a certain way, one of the natural responses that we have is we want to figure out why. Why did they do what they did? And we try to come up with the most logical explanation for their behaviors. And what we find is that sometimes we jump to conclusions, sometimes we are accurate, but sometimes we're not accurate when it comes to our attributions. And so the question once again was, why are we so poor at making attributions? And several of you chimed in. I want to go over some of your responses, but then also chime in myself. And so one of you wrote that human beings are relatively poor at making attributions due to the errors of egocentric bias, ego protective bias, fundamental attribution, self-effacement bias, premature closure, the principle of negativity, and ultimate attribution. And so these were some of the terms that we learned in class. We talked about how that fundamental attribution error, which was how we oftentimes think about a person's personal circumstances, but we don't necessarily take into account some of the situational circumstances. And what this means is we just look at a person's behavior and we attribute it solely to that person. So if they do something negative, we say that that's a bad person. If there's a student who falls in sleep in my class and I say that that's a lazy student, this is an error because we don't take into account some of the situational factors that may contribute to that person's behavior. Maybe the student who falls asleep is working 3 jobs to make ends meet. They're providing for their own family. And so their falling asleep in class isn't just because they're lazy, it's actually because they're overworking themselves. And so it's an error whenever we just look at the personal side of things but don't take in consideration the circumstances. And then similarly, when we think about the ultimate fundamental error in regards to attribution, when we don't take into consideration some of those personal factors, but we think about group affiliation. So we don't take in consideration the situation, but we look at the part of the group that that person's a part of. So we lump them in with the rest of the group and we say, well, this person happens to be let's say a black person. And we have some stereotypes about what black people do. And we see a black person do a particular thing and then we say, well, the person did that because they're black. But we don't necessarily take into consideration some of the situational things that may have caused them to do that, and we just say that it was caused because of their race. Or if we say all men are dogs, or if we say all women are emotional, we just look at the group affiliation of being men and women, but we don't take situational stuff into consideration. That's that ultimate fundamental error. We talk about ego protective bias. We talked about egocentric bias. These are just all ways, different ways in which we think that our way of doing things is the right way. We judge culture by our own culture. All those things hurt us when it comes to attributions. Another person wrote, when it comes to human beings, we can tend to make too quick of assumptions that someone's behavior is in one way or another attributed to our own personal attributions. This is a good one. This is sometimes my wife may say that when we reflect, when we deflect. So you know yourself, you know your own shortcomings, you know your own behaviors, even your positive things. So then when you see someone else's behaviors, you interpret their behaviors the same way you interpret your behaviors. Well, I normally do that for these reasons. So now when I see someone else doing that, I assume they're doing it for the same reasons. But we can't just look at the end result or the behavior and assume that the motives are the same, the rationale is the same, the reason is the same, the situation is the same, the circumstances are the same. We can't make that assumption. And so sometimes it's a dangerous thing to try to interpret someone else's behavior based upon how you would interpret your own behavior, because we're different individuals. Egocentric attributions is when we view our own behavior as normal or the standard, and we hold others to that. We do this oftentimes in America, we do it oftentimes in the church, we do it oftentimes in a lot of situations where we say that someone else's behavior isn't just different, but we fall into the trap of thinking that someone else's behavior is also incorrect or wrong or less than. And we see our way as not only a different way, but the right way. And I see a lot of times when it comes to churches and different things that nature, unfortunate, when we convert non-believers to believers, instead of recreating them in the image of God, we try to recreate them in our own image. We want them to pray the way we pray, dance the way we pray, listen to the same music we listen to, and things of that nature. And it's because we not only don't celebrate the difference, but we see the difference as somehow being unbiblical, ungodly, and things of that nature. And so that's definitely not a good thing. Someone said attributions are explanations for how people behave. Attributions are often based on different views. These perceptions are individually and socially constructed. The fact that these perceptions are constructed by individuals, the fact that these perceptions are constructed by society means that they're open to flaws. This isn't something that God spoke down and told us to write down on stone tablets like the Ten Commandments. This is man's own interpretation. So since we were the ones who came up with the rules on how we would attribute, how we would explain, it goes to reason that we may have some flaws in our own rationale, that we may allow our own insecurities to come up, we may allow our own preconceived notions to get in the way, our own stereotypes, our own prejudice. And so we can't always trust our attributions because we're flawed individuals. Someone says that I believe human beings are poor at making attributions because they use their own attributions and disposition to give meaning to others. That's true. Oftentimes when we think about what something means, we go by our own frame of reference, our own experiences, what those things mean to us. So there's this universal meaning. There may be a definition, like a denotative definition meaning, but then there's also this personal meaning. What does it mean to us? And oftentimes we interpret things based upon our own background, our own experiences, our own shortcomings, our own joys, our own pains, and so that gets in the way sometimes. Someone says, I believe that humans are experts at passing judgment on people. However, understanding more about what it means to truly attribute something to someone, it became evident that we are not as adept as when we judge someone else. And this is true. We can be good at being judgmental, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're righteous judges. It doesn't mean that we judge correctly. It just means that we do a lot of judging. And so it's not good enough just to make judgments. We should strive to make the most accurate, correct judgments. So that means we have to do a little bit more investigating. We have to be willing to listen to others and not just tell their story for us. Not just try to interpret their story based upon our own story, but allow their stories to be their stories. And so some of this goes to the fact that one communication scholar says that we are pretty good at communicating messages, but we are not as good at communicating meanings. So we can hear the message, but maybe we don't interpret the message correctly. So we can see these behaviors. We can recognize those behaviors, but we simply may not do a good job of interpreting the why behind those behaviors, the motives, the rationale. And so that's par for the course, that we may see what we see, but we may not necessarily be able to articulate or properly interpret what we're seeing. Someone said humans in general are very judgmental. We want to judge others based on our own, by the way they look, their actions, or how they talk, and we create a category for them. And someone else later on said, by nature we categorize things. And someone else said it's human tendency to simplify explanations regarding behaviors of other people. All three of those tie together, that we do like to simplify, we do like to categorize, we do like to departmentalize. And it makes a lot of sense that it's sometimes difficult to understand something in its entirety. But if we can put it into smaller chunks, if we can categorize it, if we can label it, if we can simplify it, if we can synthesize it and combine some things, it makes it easier. But sometimes it's a lazy way of doing things. That we, instead of investigating each thing and giving each thing credence, we just automatically lump it up with some other things. We automatically categorize it with some other things. And we may end up miscategorizing, we may end up prematurely interpreting something to be one thing when it's really something else. So I think it is important, especially when we're dealing with people, especially when we're dealing with people of other cultures and there's already that stigma there, that we give each person the ample opportunity to show us who they are. And that we should not be quick to judge. We should not be quick to throw them in a particular category, but that we should see those individuals as individuals. All right, so there's just a few of your thoughts and a few of my thoughts. I think overall, it's difficult when it comes to attributions for lots of reasons. Sometimes we get too lazy to get to the heart of the matter, and we just come up with the first answer and we say, hey, if it makes sense, let's run with that. That's that premature closer. Sometimes we misattribute because we see others and interpret what they're doing based upon our own experiences. And just because I saw things one way, and just because I did things for certain reasons, it doesn't mean that someone else is doing those very same things for the same reasons. Someone may steal, and it's not to say that stealing is ever right, but some people may steal just because they just like stealing. Some people may steal in certain circumstances, like if there's a flood and they're hungry and they may see other people going to a store and they need food to eat. FEMA hasn't come through. If we just simply look at the act and take that act out of context, we're not really doing justice to the attribution. If we see someone behave a certain way and we just say that they're bad, but don't take into context maybe their upbringing, their environment, what they've been exposed to, once again, we're taking those things out of context. If we just see someone do something good, there's lots of reasons why they could be doing something good. It could be religious beliefs, could be their upbringing, but we can't just say, well, it's because they're Christians. No, it could be because of other reasons. So whether it's good or bad, we have a struggle with fully determining why people do what they do. And the easiest way to solve that problem is to allow those people to speak for themselves. They can tell you why they did what they did. Then you can agree or disagree with their rationale, but I think they at least need to have the opportunity to say, if you're going to judge my behavior, at least allow me the opportunity to shape the narrative of why that behavior is what it is. All right, so this has been Professor Theo with a commentary on Forum 3. Take care and God bless.